Welcome to a fictional Civil War story by Sandarian. I did this for my history class and I really enjoyed it, so here you go. This war is more dangerous and much more deadly than any I've ever heard of. I was a kid when the Mexican War was fought. My father fought and died in it. I always expected I would be called to fight for my country. I just never expected to fight a war amongst my own countrymen. I was drafted and was given arms 2 months ago. I was marched up to the battlefront with the rest of my regiment. Unlike many soldiers, I survived my first battle, and so now I may tell the tale in horrors to you. It was evening in the forest, and it was pouring rain. The rain drenched through our clothes and made our movements mushy and sloppy. None of us wanted to be out here in the cold. Our Colonel Edward Fowler, ordered the regiment to stop marching. Here we were, standing in the wet grass, waiting for the enemy to reveal themselves. It was just our guns and our courage. They were all that we had to hold on the right flank of the main army. Normally we'd be tasked with 2 or 4 other regiments to hold the flank, but we were outnumbered in this battle. With few soldiers to spare, I believe the general picked my regiment because we were the best for the job. We're the 14th New York State Militia, but the enemy calls us the Red-Legged Devils for a reason. We were waiting in the forest for about an hour and a half when we hear the quiet footsteps of the enemy regiment. The colonel quietly orders the regiment to crouch down and get our guns ready. The stealthy rebels drew closer and closer until they were almost in plain sight. It seemed like I waited a millennia for the battle to commence. The enemy emerged out of the woods like ghostly figures. Colonel Fowler quickly shouted for us to take aim and then fire. The first volley caught the enemy by complete surprise. Sadly, the first volley wasn't the most effective one. Over half of us missed our targets. The enemy quickly retaliated and returned fire, taking down a quarter of the first row. The battle ran a pattern. We fired and killed some of them, and they returned fire and killed some of us. After 15 minutes, the enemy lost their first rank and half of their second rank. We only lost our first rank. The artillery on both sides hit the ground around us like a concentrated earthquake. Entire trees were blown over. Soldiers lost their limbs. It was a damn grim sight to behold. We could hear the screams of friendly soldiers next to us while they were dying on the battlefield. I heard screams of intense pain, which I hope you never hear in a civilian life. I shot once more and hit and killed an enemy officer. Confederates couldn't take being shot to death anymore. Fix their bayonets. Colonel Fowler ordered us to hold the line and fix our own bayonets and charge. 15 feet away from the enemy, a cannonball hit the ground, killing a few of our soldiers. There was much smoke, and all you could hear was the sounds of guns and steel on steel, clashing like in the medieval days, and screams of soldiers. Fowler fended off 2 Confederate soldiers with his saber. I rushed in to aid Fowler. I dodged a bayonet that headed towards my stomach and parried the second attack, and then I spun around and stabbed my opponent deep and kicked him off my bayonet. Fowler shot the other with his revolver. The battle was looking up. The enemy was routed, and they scattered. Another Confederate regiment, looking fiercer than the last one, came charging out of the woods with the most ferocious and terrifying war cry. Once again we fought, but this time we were outnumbered. We were tired, and the only help we had was artillery. Fowler knew we weren't going to make it out alive, and he decided the lives of his men were more important than holding the right flank for a few more minutes. He ordered a retreat, and we ran. The Confederates didn't pursue at first. They stopped and shot us in the back, and then continued to push forwards. We ran into the artillery barricade, and the artillery captain yelled to the Fowler that the 7th Union Cavalry would be coming in for support. We had to hold the artillery position. What was left of the 14th Brooklyn held the barricades and shot the pursuing Confederates. The artillery fired grape shot rounds at these Confederates. Bullets whizzed past my head, and one managed to actually graze my shoulder. The volleys and the artillery didn't stop the Confederates. It merely slowed them down a little. They charged right through the barricades and started engaging in melee with us. This time we didn't worry about losing, just knew we had to hold out. A huge Confederate soldier, about 6'4", hit me with the butt of his rifle and knocked me into the wet mud. He lifted me up by my neck and choked me. Couldn't breathe at all. I thought these were my last moments of life, and this is how it would end. Colonel Fowler saw me being lifted up and shot the man with his revolver, then entered into a duel with a Confederate lieutenant. I was on the ground and was disoriented because of the lack of oxygen. I watched the duel, clash after clash they fought, blocking and attacking. It was almost like a dance. Fowler disarmed the Confederate officer and ran through him with his blade. Revived, I got up and grabbed a Confederate infield musket. A Confederate cannonball whizzed by me and hit one of our cannonmen. The cannon captain yelled at me for support to act as a spare cannonman for them. I got to our cannons and noticed the captain was bloody and covered in filth, and had a bandage on his shoulder where he had been shot. The captain told me to pick up a ramrod and shove it into the cannon. I did as ordered. The captain proceeded to aim the cannon with the last of the grape shot. As he fired and killed a few Confederates, a Confederate colonel on horseback came over and slashed the artillery captain. I moved away and charged him with my bayonet. He shot me in the side with a revolver. I stopped in my tracks and fell over on the ground, lying in pain. The Confederate colonel got off his horse, put the revolver to my head. He pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. He was out of bullets. The rebel colonel pulled out his sword. I swept my leg and knocked his feet out from under him. The colonel jumps on me, with his sword almost to my neck. So close, I can see my own reflection in the blade. He swings his blade high up in the air and cries out. The artillery captain, barely alive and on the ground, had shoved his sword into the Confederate colonel. The captain looks at me with a brief smile, then his bloodied face and body go lifeless, as if his spirit has left the world. I lay on the ground bleeding out, and I could only hear the sound of horses getting nearer. I see a white horse trotting closer and closer, but the pain from my wound was too great to comprehend. Was it the angel of death? I went unconscious. I woke up in the medical bay, still alive but in pain. The doctor said I suffered a painful wound, but not lethal. The doctor said the bullet didn't hit any vital arteries, and that I would be fine in a couple of weeks. I put my head slowly on the pillow, and breathed a small sigh of relief. I closed my eyes with a slight smile, because I survived the battle